Welcome to Module 8, Lesson 1. Our I can statement is, I can use different strategies to multiply with multiples of 10. So we're going to be focusing on multiplying and using multiples of 10 to help us do that. Right, number 1. The coding club meets for 60 minutes each week for 16 weeks. How many minutes will they meet during the 16-week period? How can we rename one of the factors using place value? One of the things we can do is we can take our 60 minutes and rename that as 6 tens. So now it'll ask us to show how we can use place value to find the product. So we know in order to find how many minutes they meet during the 16-week period, we have 16 weeks times the 60 minutes a week will give us the answer of how many. I'm going to use an M for minutes. We're going to use that renamed factor and have 16 times 6 tens. Go ahead and solve for 16 times 6. You can use your knowledge of place value and distributive property to multiply. You can use a standard algorithm and stack it vertically, but go ahead and solve for 16 times 6. Pause if you need any more time to solve. You should have gotten 96 as your answer to 16 times 6. So here I use standard algorithm. Here I use distributive property to break it apart into 6 times 10 and 6 times 6. So I know that 16 times 6 tens is equal to 96, but I'm still working in tens here. And this still equals my minutes. I need to now rename 96 tens. 96 tens is equal to 960. So, how many minutes do they meet for? They meet for 960 minutes over the course of 16 weeks. Letter B asks us, how did we use place value to help us solve the problem? Our understanding of place value is what allowed us to rename 6 tens. Why did that matter? By renaming 60 as 6 tens, we could multiply by a one-digit number, which is something that we are able to do. So you can answer it with something like that. Right? Our knowledge of place value allowed us to multiply by a simpler number. It allowed us to use multiplication skills we already know how to do. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next problem. Number 2. It takes 12 lines of code to move a character through an obstacle course. Okay, so we're talking about doing coding, so using technology to create something. So this is on like a game that they've made. So it takes 12 lines to move them through the obstacle course. Adrian wants to move 30 characters through the course. How many lines of code will she write? Okay, so we know that 30 characters have to do 12 lines of code each. Letter A asks us how to use the associative property of multiplication. All right, we're going to review that in a minute here. So if you aren't sure what the associative property is, that's okay. We're going to come back to this. The first step before we're going to use the associative property is we need to rename one of the factors as a product of a number and 10. So it's not asking us to rename using place value. It's asking us to rename a factor as a product. So we have 30 30 is equal to what times 10? It's equal to 3 times 10. Okay, so it's asking us just to fill this in here. 30 times 12 is the same as saying 3 times 10 times 12. So now it asks us, how can we use the associative property of multiplication to solve? Now, if you still aren't sure about what the associative property is, I want you to take a look at the parentheses here. Okay, when we use order of operations, we solve what is in parentheses first. Now, we have 3 factors that are all being multiplied. When all of our factors are being multiplied, we know that the order in which we multiply does not matter. Associative property says we can change where those parentheses are. Since it is saying 3 times 10 times 12 with solving 3 times 10 first, we can change where the parentheses are because we're working with all multiplication. So instead of saying 3 times 10, because then we would have 30 times 12, we are going to move those parentheses around 10 times 12. That's going to give us a new equation of 3 times 120. I know that 3 times 12 is equal to 36. So this would be 3 times 12 tens. 36 tens is equal to 360. Now, letter B is going to ask us to solve this another way. And this is a strategy I love to use. Halving and doubling. Okay, so halving and doubling is another way of thinking about solving multiplication equations. So it's going to ask us, of which factor can you find half to make the problem simpler? Now, simpler is a word here that they're using. When we think about a simple fact, we need to think about when we regroup and rename. Right? We're always looking to move something into a single digit. Right now, we have 30 and 12. If we have either of these, which of these will be a single digit? Well, half of 30 is 15. Half of 12 is 6. So which factor would be simpler? Half of 12, because it's going to give us a 1-digit number to multiply by. So we can say half of 12 is 6, which is a 1-digit number. Again, and why does that matter? We, at this point, know how to multiply by 1-digit numbers, right? We can multiply 1 digit by multiple digits. All right. So the next step is to write the new equation. So with halving and doubling, we've halved 1. So now we have 30 times 6. Okay, 3 times 6 is equal to 18. But we are looking at 3 tens. So 3 tens times 6 is 18 tens, or 180. But we aren't done. We found half the product. So what do we need to do to find the final product? We now need to double. Okay, we've done the halving, and now we need to do the doubling. So we need to double 180. There's a couple of ways you can double 180. You can do 180 times 2. Or you can double it by adding it twice, 180 plus 180. Okay, but however you do it, go ahead and find double 180. And you will find that we get the same answer as we did before, Adrian writes 360 lines of code. All right, please go ahead and pause the video and solve the check understanding. Press play when you are ready to start again. All right, you should have found that there were 1,500 paper clips. I used the associative property here to take 20 and rename it as 2 factors, 2 times 10. I did 75 times 2, which was 150. Then I multiplied that by 10 to get 1,500. You could have also used halving and doubling. I halved 20 because 10 is an easy number for me to multiply by. It's going to give me simple facts. So 75 times 10 is 750. I then needed to double it, so I just added another 750 to double and got 1,500.